And it took a little while to get it hooked into a Bluetooth speaker because I had to use the cow to do it. But that works. But then my mom's like, "What?" I walked her through doing it.
before. So it's a very collaborative.
Thank you.
Okay. Also, if you want to tweet about what's going on here today, feel free, and you can use this hashtag, and we will see how much excitement everyone is having on this wonderful event that we're hosting today. So one announcement I wanted to make is that there's been a change in the GDG logo. Maybe none of you even knew what the logo looked like before. So I figure I'll show what some of these logos look like that have changed. So the old logo for the Google developer community, which is the people at Google who develop code and they're like the developer relations folks and whatever. This is their former logo. Not really sure what it means. It kind of has the Google colors in it, and maybe it makes some kind of container of some sort. Who knows what the purpose is there. This logo is clearly based on it in some fashion. It's like the two on top of each other, I guess. And this is technically the old GDG logo. That's the Google Developer Groups, which is what we're all a part of here. And then there was this other logo for the Google Developer Experts community. These are the people that, as I mentioned, I am one, and there are many others. There's about 900 others. People who Google has anointed as an expert in a certain area of technology, and they send these people out to meetup events and to speak at conferences, and they also have us writing blog posts about things and so forth. And so I think this one seems to very clearly have the X in it from the experts, but it also draws from those two other logos. It's like the Google developer one goes in, but the experts one goes out or something. I don't really understand all of it. But the new logo is this, and it covers all three of those groups. The DevRel community, the Google Developer Groups community, which are groups like these, and the Google Developer Experts are all under sort of one umbrella, and they have this logo. And if you're lucky enough to win one of the raffles today, you'll see we have a couple of items that Google gave us on the same day they announced the new logo, but they misprinted them. You might not be able to see, but the red is underneath the blue, and in this one they did it exactly the opposite. So there's a couple of collector's items here that have the old logo. Yeah, exactly. But I think this does really have a very developer kind of feel to it. The way it has those angled brackets, I think regardless of what language you're programming in, those are a familiar thing. So I asked people if they could tell me what it means, but nobody really had the answer. You can follow us on Twitter. It's not super active yet, but the more of you follow us, the more content we will post on there. So please do that. Right now, we focus mainly on posting announcements of our upcoming events, but as we get better at this, we'll post announcements on various news that may be of interest to the community and other sorts of things. And we do have a Slack channel. Again, I'll preface it with it's not super active yet, but the more people that join, the better it'll be. And we're available on there, so if you wanted to reach out to us and ask a question or whatever, you could always do that on the Slack. This is something we would love to spark and have it be useful for people so that there's like an ongoing community that doesn't just happen during the couple of hours each month that we're in the room together, but it could just be all the time. So people, make some friends here and then they want to stay in contact. That could be a way to do that. Also, we highly recommend a couple of podcasts. The Google Cloud Platform podcast is great. They generally cover like whatever just came out on Google Cloud that might be of interest, and they generally have like the PM for that particular product is the person on the podcast. So it's pretty insightful. There's plenty of releases, so every week there's usually something interesting. The most recent one is about something we'll discuss today, a new release called Cloud Run, and Starren is one of the people I deal with on a regular basis working on this product, so it's good to see him on the podcast. Similarly, there's a Kubernetes podcast that I don't remember the frequency of that one. It may be weekly as well. And they have Eric Brewer on this week. If you don't know who Eric is, he's a pretty big badass in the industry. He's the person who developed the CAP theorem, which is the idea that database can't be super fast and super consistent and super reliable all at the same time. And so they hired him at Google, and then they went and built Spanner, and then they went telling the industry that they disproved the CAP theorem, and it's cool for them to say that because they hired the guy who wrote the CAP theorem. But Eric is great. We've had him here at the Broad a couple of times. And I'd like to let you know about some upcoming events that may be of interest. Our cohort, the GDG Cambridge meetup, is running a Women Tech Makers International Women's Day celebration later this week. It's hosted at Wayfair Boston, and they have a speaker who's going to be doing a sort of a short talk, and then the main part of the event is a panel with executives from Amazon, Facebook, Google, and Microsoft all sitting on a panel discussing what it's like managing engineering efforts at their various companies. So that should be a pretty interesting event, and you can sign up on the link here. Again, I gave out the slide, so you don't need to take a picture of this link. You could just go to that slide. There's also a beginner Kubernetes workshop that you can sign up for. I have a bit.ly link here that you can use. It's in May, and it's basically an all-day event where you can learn the basics of working with Kubernetes. Sometimes Google posts these, and like maybe I find out about them, or Joe will find out through our company, through like our Google sales rep, but they won't necessarily like advertise them very widely, or maybe they direct mail people or whatever. So whenever we find out about these things, we try to make sure to let everyone in the group know. And then we're working on several upcoming meetups for those of you who have been coming to this event for a while. The idea that we're in the middle of doing a meetup and we have 3 future meetups already planned is kind of ridiculous and off the charts here. So we're very proud of this. Having a pipeline is one of the most important things about trying to keep these events going on a regular basis. So our next event in May is going to be at Athena Health. And we have John Blamka, who is the CIO there, who will be speaking. And I'm very excited to have Lynn Langett, who is a Google developer expert. She's someone who I've known through the internet for some time, and we met last year at Google Cloud Next. And then she's now coming to do some consulting with the Broad, I'm very excited about. So she's going to be here on site doing a 1-week engagement with Broad Institute. And I was like, hey, why don't you come speak at the meetup while you're in town? So we're lucky enough that that worked out. I haven't fleshed out exactly what the topic is yet, but when we post it on Meetup, we'll provide more details. And then one of the co-organizers of the GDG Cambridge meetup has agreed to speak at an upcoming event. We're aiming for July, but we'll let you know once that gets solidified. Okay, one last upcoming event that I wanted to mention is Google I/O, and I'm actually going to just play this video here for 2 minutes so you can get hyped about Google I/O.
You gotta kill this.
Muted.
We're good now. Thanks.
So unlike a typical conference where you have it in like a big stuffy conference center, this thing happens at an outdoor amphitheater where you normally go see like concerts and stuff, and it's all sunny and they have tents and they have like there was one demo that they showed that were these flowers, and you would like look at the flowers, and if you smiled at them they would change one color, and if you frowned at them they would change a different color, showing off a lot of the machine learning stuff. And they have a lot of consumer facing things like updates to Google Photos and updates to the way Maps works and self-driving car related stuff. So it's a pretty interesting event. Unlike Google Cloud Next, where there was like 36,000 people there this year, this conference is kind of capped at like 6,000 or 7,000. So it's very hard to get in. You have to like know somebody or get invited. That's the downside. But the upside is there are not 36,000 people there, and you can attend most of the things and actually see what's happening. So Next is kind of overwhelming. This is a big improvement.
Would you say I/O is more for developers?
Yeah, I/O is definitely more focused on web developers, Android developers, app developers in general, and like I said, consumer-facing stuff like Google Photos, where at Google Cloud Next you don't hear much about those products in particular. Last year was the first time I attended, and this will be my second year. I don't know if I will continue to do this as a regular thing, but I was lucky enough to get an invite, so I took advantage of it. So we want to go over some of the announcements. This is not something that I have successfully consumed entirely in my head. I made my mission for my 6-hour flight back from San Francisco to have read this blog post and to have understood all 122 announcements and what they like mean and how they change the world for me. That was not successful. But I will quickly just scroll through it so you can see how vast the list is. And each of these has like a blog post associated with it, giving you all the details about what was announced. So I got about to like maybe the 40s or 50s, and I really felt like I had understood everything up until that point, and I just could not continue through the whole thing. So the sections that they cover in that blog post are infrastructure announcements, which has things like new data centers, new regions, that sort of thing. Hybrid cloud announcement, which I'm going to go into in a little more detail shortly. A bunch of things around serverless, and I was lucky enough to be involved in the serverless spotlight session where they announced many of these products, and I was up there for 5 minutes during that session, which is exciting. There's a lot of sessions around DevOps and SRE, and then work Google is doing to try and create tools and best practices for people in that community. I really enjoyed some of the content there. API management, obviously there's many releases in this space, new APIs or new features for current APIs. In networking, there are new regions, there's new network performance levels, and a bunch of new security features. Security and identity is all of the IAM features, and there's a whole space called cloud identity, which is a way that you can manage your institutional accounts for your users without having to deploy G Suite for your organization. You just use it as an identity system rather than using all of the applications and things. There's a whole new area called smart analysis where they've created some entirely new products. There are a bunch of releases around Windows stuff. So for example, you would have seen an announcement about new hosted version of Cloud SQL that supports SQL Server. So for like my organization, we have a bunch of legacy applications that are still running on Windows on-prem, and they still are using SQL Server. Those have been troublesome to move to the cloud. Well, now Google provides a hosted version of SQL Server. So instead of building a VM and running SQL Server on that VM, you can just sort of use a hosted service. And then there's a lot of talk around customers and partnerships. There's like half a day at Next where that's mainly the thing that they're focusing on, just expressing how much Google is a legit enterprise company and how they actually have real customers, and some of those customers are businesses you've heard of, and they do important things in some cases, and they rely on Google for that. So it's all very exciting for them that they have sort of established themselves in that space. It turns out that developers care very little about that, so that's like the least exciting part of the conference for those folks. But there are a lot of important announcements there. So Anthos. I start with Anthos because I feel like it's maybe the most exciting technical announcement that Google released during the conference. I also really love the logo. I feel like maybe some of you are looking at that logo and you're actually like getting an understanding of what this is even before I talk about it. But basically Anthos is this new approach to hybrid cloud. It is a marketing term that's been applied to a set of products that already did exist, that were already being developed. It used to be called the Cloud Services Platform, or the CSP. And before it was called that, it was just a collection of tools like Istio and a few other things that provide a service mesh and a security layer and whatnot. Those have been fleshing out for the last couple of years, and Google has now turned the entire thing into sort of a platform or something. I'm not exactly sure how they're presenting it, if it's like an open source project, or if it's a product, or if it's a platform. But what it is ultimately is a collection of tools that allow you to build an infrastructure, let's say on-prem using Kubernetes, and then extend that infrastructure into other public clouds or other private clouds, and basically maintain a layer on top of it, which is the sort of Anthos layer. And this would very much allow you to build world-class scalable cloud applications and be fairly agnostic to where you are hosting them. In fact, you could have one application where portions of it are happening in your data center and portions of it are happening in various public clouds. And if you take one of those clouds out of the mix, you could just like replace it with another one relatively easily once you're leveraging all these technologies. So this was, I heard people talking about this before, and I knew there was going to be a rebranding here, and I was like, meh, like a thing you've been talking about for 2 years has a new name, who really cares? And then they announced it, and sort of the energy around it and the way they're approaching this feels like a big bet for them, in the same way that they have had great success releasing Kubernetes as an open source technology and then seeing it basically take over the world. And now they're trying to do the same thing with TensorFlow, where they've sort of coined the key technology that's used in machine learning and AI across the industry, regardless of which platform or which cloud you're using. And so I think this is attempting to get the same thing. It's like, in the same way that everyone has embraced Docker and Kubernetes, regardless of whether they're a Microsoft shop or an Amazon shop or a Google shop, I believe the goal is for people to embrace this as a way to build infrastructure. And once you've done that and you've sort of invested in this open source technology, then now you're no longer beholden to whichever cloud you're in, and that becomes very compelling. Some of the fear and uncertainty about making a huge investment in the cloud is the idea that maybe you wouldn't be able to get out once you got in there. And I just think this is really something that will help with that quite a bit.
No, as I said, just one really neat thing to demo this show for this is like you're looking at your GKE dashboard in Google Cloud in the console. And you've got some services deployed, and this one's in Amazon, this one's in a rack in your data center, this one's in Google Cloud, and you just have one pane of glass. They all talk to each other just automatically. It's really neat.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I'm excited to start seeing this in the wild and start thinking about how we might use it in our environment. We have the whole idea where there's like a large legacy on-prem infrastructure, and then there's also a large sort of new greenfields infrastructure in the cloud, and sort of figuring out how to get all that old stuff into the new stuff is challenging. If the approach you take is to sort of in place, get everything onto Kubernetes and start using these technologies, then when it comes time to move it, that doesn't really present an issue anymore. That becomes the easy part. So it's very exciting. And I have only slightly absorbed this based on the announcement, but it's going to take more time actually working with it to really understand the impact. Did you, Norbert, did you want to talk a little bit about this one?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Google put something called Healthcare API, which has been an alpha product, been private alpha for a few months.
Could you speak up?
Yeah, sure. The Healthcare API has been a private alpha product for some months, and you had to get whitelisted and talk to the product manager and so forth. I was in the middle of doing that, and then I sent my last email, got a response back, hey, good news, it's in beta now. So if, obviously the Broad Institute is in the middle of genomics research, but this is the healthcare a little bit more broadly defined. So inside big hospitals like Partners and MGH, they're just across the road. A lot of messaging protocols like HL7 Fire, which is a new API-based mechanism for getting data in and out of EHRs, electronic health record systems, and then DICOM, which is a standard used for imaging and images and metadata for those images. So these are some of the main interfaces that are used inside the health organizations. And Google's motivation here is pretty obvious. I think if you're a cloud, a giant cloud provider, and you have really strong ML and AI tools that work in healthcare, it might be to your advantage to be able to bring a lot of that healthcare data into your cloud system. So that's the motivation for that. We're planning to, there is a hackathon that's happening in New York City this Friday. I'm going down to that. It's going to be on this product. I don't know what's going to be in the hackathon, but I got invited, and I said, well, I'm going to go. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to that. So if you want to go to that also, I may be able to arrange for you to get invited. I'm not sure. It could be filled up already today, though, because it's happening on Friday. So, but one person spoke to me. If anyone else wants, let me know. We're planning to have a hackathon on this topic later this year. I don't know if it'll be based on what they do in New York, but it probably will be in some way. And then, talk to me about that if you have data sets or good questions that you want to answer using this type of healthcare data. It probably will not be genomics data, though. Right. I'm thinking that we probably want something that's a little more generally applicable to like a hospital setting rather than Broad Institute. And I guess that's it. Great. Thank you. Yeah.
This,
Oh, right, I just want to mention, we're also, the product manager, or product owner for this product has agreed to speak to us here at this meeting. I don't know when that's going to happen. He's based in California, so he said the next time he comes to the East Coast, he might be able to drop in and do a presentation for us, and that would be he's very knowledgeable about this.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, last year for 2 months, I ended up going to New York to take care of my father who was sick, and it involved a lot of driving like from one hospital to get like a CD-ROM that had an image from the scan that he had gotten a month earlier, and carrying that CD-ROM to the other hospital where there's a doctor who's taking care of him today. And there was no way for that to happen without me driving from one hospital to the other with a CD. It just could not happen. They can't send it, it's just crazy how broken and old that is. So we get all of these providers on the same protocol so that they can securely transmit this information about patients from one healthcare provider to another. So, I'm really excited about the potential for this because I was baffled at how bad the situation is today. And it's just a matter of all these large organizations that have some protocols and some formats that they're working with have never been incentivized to try and make something that was totally portable. And so Google comes in and was like, well, not being invested in any format currently, we're kind of, don't care about it. We can just do whatever makes sense for the industry. So I think this is a great approach, and I'm looking forward to seeing many providers getting on board with that. I wanted to cover some of the data management announcements. I mentioned the SQL Server, which I think is a big deal for folks who manage Microsoft SQL environments. Another big announcement, at least from the Broad's perspective, we use a lot of storage. It's probably 75% of our cloud bill. And so having more storage classes is very helpful. In this case, the archive class that Google announced is very inexpensive. It's cheaper than the nearline or the cold line. So you can put things in there that you don't intend to read very often, and it's at a low cost. So this is great for us because we do generate a ton of data that we don't necessarily ever look at a second time. Sometimes we do, but very often we don't. So this is very compelling. I really, though, and when I read the blog post announcing this feature, I particularly liked the phrasing that the recovering the data out of this is not glacially slow. That is a large amount of shade being thrown on a product called Glacier that Amazon makes, which is their archive tier storage. And the difference between Amazon's version of these tiers and Google's version of these tiers is, at least for the multi-regional, the nearline, and the cold line, at Google they all perform exactly the same. So there's no extra latency or wait time when you try to retrieve things from the archival storage. So at Amazon, Glacier is like on tape. So when you ask for one of those files, the robots helpfully go grab that tape and put it into the tape drive and retrieve it for you. Google is not using tape in this situation. And I don't know how they built a system that is a small fraction of the cost of the regular storage, but it performs very close to what the regular storage does. It's just crazy.
It's
but
like,
the writer's glacially slow.
It's like a penny a gig a month or something like that.
Yeah, it's off the charts cheap. Just don't try to read it back that often.
Yeah, don't do that.
That's not viable. Another thing we're excited about is the bucket-only storage, the bucket-only policy for IAM, which is by default, buckets have a lot of options with regards to permissions. You can use the IAM permissions at the project or the bucket or the object level. And then there's the legacy apples, which maps more to how Amazon and other S3-based systems work. And so it can be very confusing where you can have a bucket where a set of people can read it, and some of the objects some other people can read, but not the person that owns the bucket. And then some objects people can read based on their Google identity, not based on whether they're a member of the project or not. And so that can all be very confusing. So for us, we like this feature because it basically sets the bucket so that the only permissions that apply are the bucket level permissions. So I create a bucket and I say this user and this service account can access this bucket, and that's the end of it. There's no other level of granularity that I would have to parse in order to determine who can access stuff in this bucket. So when my application just needs a bucket and a few users who can access everything in that bucket, this is great, and it's great for auditing and knowing who can do what. And another announcement in the data management area is cloud file store being generally available. This is Google's hosted file system service. It is not like equivalent to the Broad's Isilon infrastructure. It doesn't perform at that scale, but it is a file system that you don't need to manage, that you can just deploy. And if your application uses like NFS or something, then you could just deploy this and not have to manage it. So it is easier. It's just not necessarily as performant or
Lukas,
featureful.
could you compare cloud file store versus persistent disks? When do you pick which?
Yeah, there's actually a really great chart, which I won't pull up right now, but has like a decision tree on all the storage products, including things like sheets and any kind of thing that allows you to store data on what the choices might be. I would say that I wouldn't really recommend using, like spinning up your own VMs, running NFS service on those VMs, and then having another set of VMs that you own mount the file systems from that.
We don't do that. We use persistent disks.
Yeah, so persistent disk is great, but like only the machine that has that disk can access it. So
yeah.
I would say the difference between file store and persistent disk is that the file store you could share with many servers that could all mount that file system. And the persistent disk, there's only going to be one system that has that mounted. But yeah, there's plenty of differentiators depending on whether you need file store or data store, or whether you need a bucket, and they have a good decision tree for that.
So since the file service came out, managed file service came out from Google, has anybody internally at Broad done a benchmark with Isilon NAS?
Yeah, it's just not comparable.
Slow, but
it's not comparable. This file store service is more like I spun up a VM, and that VM is my NFS server. Whereas the Isilon service is more like I have 96 racks of storage, and that's a cluster, and the performance is distributed across the whole thing. So Isilon scales linearly. Like if I have 2 Isilons and I want twice as much performance, I just add 2 more nodes and I have twice as much performance. And in this thing, you just get what you get in the size of a single VM. So in the space of being like, I want to be able to access NFS and I want it to be reliable and I don't want to have to manage it or hire someone to manage it, this is amazing. In the space where like I need a world-class, like high-performance file system to have thousands of hosts all read the same file at the same time, this is not for that at all. And we've tested, like we've tested a couple of different vendor approaches to how to expose those kind of features within the cloud. So with one vendor, literally they like ship their equipment to a data center right adjacent to Google, and they got a direct connect, and they're just like providing it as a service, but it's not cloudy at all. It's like the thing that they always provided to you in your own data center. They're just like providing it right next door to a Google data center, and so it's like very, very fast. The NetApp one, NetApp has their offering. It's not quite GA yet, but their offering is very compelling because it is actually NetApp's, and it is actually in a data center nearby, but it looks entirely like the Google Cloud Console. So every aspect of interacting with this NetApp service is truly a first-class Google experience. And it's not out yet. It'll be out in the next couple of months. But the reason it's not out yet is because there's actually going to be Google APIs that run this thing. So like in the same way that Google has a storage API and a data store API, Google's going to have some sort of NetApp API, which Google owns, Google's SREs manage and keep it running, but it talks to the NetApps that NetApp is managing. And I think that is a more compelling use case for a customer because you don't want to just like have all the same effort to manage the infrastructure, but it's just in someone else's cloud. Like you want to kind of reduce some of that. And I think that's what their thing does for the most part.
All right. As far as I've heard, there are additional cost-saving features there in NetApp.
Oh yeah, there's some deduplication and other capabilities that they introduce as well. So some of the things I was most excited about are in the serverless space. Cloud Run probably being one of the most exciting. So for folks who are familiar with serverless, Google has a feature called Cloud Functions, which we've talked about at this meetup a bunch of times, and Joe's like a world expert on the service because they run billions of containers at Maple. But this enhances that experience where before you were limited by you have to deploy something as a Node app, or eventually they added Python and maybe one or two other languages. There's a few announcements just recently. But now if you can put it in a container, you can run it serverless. So that's very compelling. I saw on the day of the announcement, someone went and found a Python 1 application that only runs in Python 1, and they were able to build a container that has that version of Python in it and deploy that as a serverless app in the cloud, which is crazy. Another one that I saw, someone took a 15-year-old copy of OpenOffice and made a cloud service that generates a PDF using OpenOffice, and it's just running inside a container. So I think this really opens up serverless to a whole bunch of other spaces where it was not accessible previously. And in the same vein, Knative is Google's technology for basically running your own containers, your own cloud functions within your environment. So you build an infrastructure, a Kubernetes infrastructure on-prem or in your own private cloud, and then you can write and deploy containers with the same experience that you have deploying them on Google's cloud, but using your own infrastructure. So I think that's very compelling. And we have some new versions available. So Node 8 is now supported, Python 3, and Go 1.11.
And Java 8 is now in alpha for Cloud Functions. Last year you could only use JavaScript, but now it's Python, Go, Java, a lot of stuff.
Did you want to mention some of these?
Yeah, I should have merged my data management point with your earlier one, but for me, the enhancements to Cloud SQL are very significant. And Postgres 11 has now been added as an open source, along with, in Cloud SQL, MySQL usually gets most of the attention because it's very popular. For many years, I thought that Postgres is actually a superior database to MySQL in a lot of ways. And we can have a long discussion about that if you want to. But anyway, there's much better support now for Postgres 11, and that in itself is an excellent product. So if you want an open source database, take a look at that. By the way, I also talked to one of the hosts of the podcast, which is Gabby, like her last name.
Oh, no, I don't remember her.
She's a big MySQL fan, so I told her, you gotta have a podcast on Postgres. The smart analytics stuff is a lot of the points that I'm really interested in that were mentioned on the 121 items above are Data Fusion, which is a new ETL tool that's very exciting. I haven't played with it yet, but it really it's both scalable and easy to use and will really facilitate moving big volumes of data into BigQuery, so that's very exciting. They also seem to have a really great product roadmap for this, including an MDM solution. And I think it's really very interesting development and will work well with BigQuery. BigQuery itself had at least 4 major new enhancements to it, and I've just listed them here. What I just will say to you now, they make BigQuery, so BigQuery works both really well for small volume users, I would say even casual users of a data warehouse, and also at the high end for the huge petabyte scale. And these enhancements cover the whole range from, like for example, you can now connect through Sheets in G Suite. You can talk to a BigQuery database. That is phenomenal because you don't have to actually know anything about the cloud products themselves. You can just be off in an office using G Suite, and you've got all the power of BigQuery behind you. It's just really amazing. So that's at the kind of low end, and then at the high end, we have things like machine learning enhancements like AutoML, and you can import TensorFlow models now into BigQuery. I haven't tried either of these things yet, but they're very new and exciting, and I really want to get my hands on those as soon as I can.
Okay, so let's get into some of the next extended content. Much like I did with Google I/O, I'm going to start with a quick video here. We don't have nearly the sound system that Google had at the pretty that Twitter had moved 300 petabytes of data to Google Cloud. That's just a lot, and I fancied us kind of a big storage customer, and we don't have anywhere near 300. And that's only one application that Twitter has, so it's just mystifying to see how much stuff some people have. So I wanted to point out that we're not going to sit here and watch like 3 days worth of videos where there were literally 11 sessions happening at the same time for 3 solid days. So what I'm going to try to do is give you all some direction on what you can watch on your own time. So first of all, the main page for all the GCP videos is this one. You can find everything on here, but they've done some breaking it down for us. So for example, if you're just interested in seeing a particular track, they have all the videos as a playlist in each track. And they've also done the same thing by each industry. So if you're in a particular industry, like the gaming industry, you could find like all the videos that happened at the conference about that particular area. There's a healthcare one and a media and entertainment one. So I think that's very compelling. Highly recommend this as a way to process all of this content. Here is a list of all the different tracks that they had. There were some I highlighted because those are the ones I think your organizers were sort of most interested in, although it's a lot. Like there's a lot of great stuff in there, but you have to kind of try to pick a couple areas to focus on because you can't focus on everything. And so for me, I was particularly looking at the serverless stuff. I know Norbert is really interested in all the machine learning and artificial intelligence stuff, as well as the big data. And just in general, the whole thing is pretty over the top. So I encourage you to just like dip your toe in the water and check it out. If you have to watch 3 videos, I would say the main keynotes are probably a good way to go to give you like a good sort of breadth of everything that happened. The opening keynote, maybe not like the most exciting of the 3, but if you've watched any of Google's events in the last couple of years, I would say that their new head of Google Cloud is slightly more dynamic on stage than Diane was, although he still sort of leaves a lot to be desired with his presence. So there was a lot of people commenting about it, but it was like, he's not nearly as bad as the last person was. I mean, everyone who made a bad comment, I was like, come on, were you here last year? Like, this is amazing compared to before. So then the developer keynote is probably my favorite. I know almost all the people that are in this keynote now after working so closely with these folks. Adam stopped me on the street to compliment my sneakers, so we have a whole thing now. I appreciate that. Anyone who notices, I always appreciate. And he actually went on stage to give this keynote wearing bands that had flames on them. So he's in a similar boat to me. But this, they do some cool demos. Last year, this is where Kelsey came out and gave like a 45-minute talk where everyone who looked at his slides, it just said, Kelsey enters the room, and then ad lib. And then he just did this live demo that blew everyone's minds, and he had no slides to reference from at all. So the developer keynote is great, and then Urs gives a product innovation keynote, which I also highly recommend. These are like the big high-level ones that if you didn't watch any of the other sessions, you should check these out, and it'll give you a pretty good understanding of where Google's at right now and where they're trying to go. Also, I will give a pitch for 2 sessions in particular. This one where I was able to participate during the session, which was very exciting. And I was on stage with Oren talking about all of the serverless products. I only did 5 minutes, but that was a lot of fun. And then I was also on a panel where we talked about billing. And so it was myself, someone from Etsy, and 2 other companies, all just kind of talking about how we deal with paying the cloud bill and how we manage the bill and make sure we don't overspend and all that. And actually, just because it's fresh in my mind, I'll share, or maybe I won't because I'm not logged in. We had a little incident this week, which I was going to share at the Broad, which is one of there's a few things that have happened over the years where it's been a really useful learning experience. Like the time one of us committed one of our service account keys to a public Git repo. And then within 5 minutes, there was random people doing Bitcoin mining on our VMs. So that was kind of one of those things that I mention all the time. This is another one. So earlier this week, or at the end of last week, we had a user who was working with BigQuery. They had some queries that they were running on the Oracle database that were fine or whatever. And so they tried to move this workload into the cloud. They had what actually turned out to be a 30 gigabyte database. I incorrectly tweeted here, and you can't edit tweets, so it just has to be out there forever now. But it was a 30 gigabyte database, which they mistakenly queried 200,000 times. And it did in fact cost $30,000+ for something they did just like a few hours during the workday. And I was involved with them. They were like, oh, we're having, in fact, you were involved with them too. We're doing something with BigQuery, it's not working very well. And we were trying to debug the problem with them. I had no idea how bad it was. And the following day they were like, oh, we looked at the bill and we just spent $30,000.
I should have listened to Joe.
So this is definitely something to be considerate of. My favorite part of this tweet, though, is that the first response I got was from the head of BigQuery at Google and said, we'll take care of it.
This guy's got connections.
So the person who made this mistake, the following morning, they sent me a new PowerPoint presentation that they had said, which is like, why you should come work at the Broad. And page 1 of the PowerPoint was the first tweet, and page 2 was the response from Tino, and then page 3 was just Tino's bio, and it's like head of BigQuery at Google. So I guess as a software engineer, if you're gonna make a mistake, this is the circumstances that you'd like to do that under, where it just gets taken care of. So yeah, those are the sessions that I was directly involved in. And now we have a survey. This is a very brief survey. The main reason that we're having you take it is because we need to collect attendance for Google. And the way we're encouraging you to take it is this is how you will be entered to participate in these wonderful gifts up here. So I encourage everyone to please fill out the form and at least enter your first name and last initial so that we have all the names. And I'm going to give everyone a few minutes to do that.
And a major shout out to Google. Thank you for the food.
Indeed, they covered the food this time.
I guess it.
Although, if you know of any sponsors who want to help pay for food for this group, we are very interested in that.
Or if you own an Indian restaurant.
Correct. Correct.
Let's take a picture.
I'm going to add one of these stickers here with the incorrect logo. Oh, so I'll go through what some of the items are while you're filling out the form. So we have a GDG cup here with the bad logo on it. There's a Google bottle and another one that I'm not quite sure what it looks like, but I'm almost certain it has a Google logo on it. There's a Chromecast. There's a Google Mini. We have a set of headphones with the Google Cloud logo on it. This is what you would get at Google Cloud Next if you passed the Cloud Architect certification, which I did, thank you very much. We have a beanie hat here with the Google Cloud logo. There are some Google Cloud sunglasses. And there are some socks, and Chrome socks, as well as Google Cloud socks. These are awesome. I highly recommend the socks. I'm wearing them myself today. They came from the BioIT conference recently. And this extremely strange one, which turns out is both a coaster with the Forseti logo on it, and it's a weird thing you can use to bundle up some cables. So there's that.
Throwing a DevFest t-shirt.
Oh, very nice. DevFest, that's in Vancouver DevFest. They're one of the other GDG groups, but they're in Vancouver.
Nice hiking metal mugs here. Another GDG summer beach blanket for you. But the best thing, while you need your GDG apron, when you're cooking up some code there in the cloud, we got you covered. So, of course, you can only pick one thing when you come up here.
Yeah, that's the hard part. And luckily, whatever doesn't go today, we'll have available for a future event. So, you know, you can always come back. Yeah, the Chrome socks are rare.
You don't see those.
So if people are tempted, I think there is a feedback mechanism on meetup, and we've, as organizers, found that to be really unuseful.
Yeah, that's why.
And so if you're tempted to do that, please don't bother. We're gonna do this survey instead, because our survey gives you a chance to say what we're not doing so well. On Meetup, everything is a positive, like, you're awesome, you're fantastic, you're perfect, you're wonderful. And it's like, so we never learn about things that we're not, where we need improvement. And so that's why we have this form instead.
Cool, so everybody get a chance, we need extra time here. This feeds straight into the wheel of fortune that we're gonna bring up next.
Wheel of names.
Where is it? Sounds like we got it.
Okay, 35 responses, I'm gonna go with that. Oh, 36.
36, all right.
Closing, oh, 37.
7.
37. Okay. Here we go.
This is a great app made by GDG. If you go to wheelofnames.com, you can use it at work as well.
Yeah, it's cool. So you just put the names in, and then I think the way they want us to use this usually is it only works with noise, right?
Oh, yeah.
So if everyone claps, yeah,